All right, so here we are, lesson 5 of the Kabbalah of meaning. So there was a guy named Josh who was significantly overweight, and his coworkers finally convinced him to begin a habit of healthier eating. No cake, no extra treats and nosh that are unnecessary. Certainly none that are not part of the worship of God and the celebration of Shabbos. And on a regular Tuesday, no more cakes, that's for sure. It so happens he stuck to this diet for about a month. He was looking healthier, he was looking more fit. And one day he shows up to the office munching a big birthday cake. And he said, Josh, it's not even your birthday today. What are you doing with that? It's like, well, I have to tell you a story of divine providence. And the story is this morning I was on my way to work. I was on my way into the office and I drove by my favorite bakery, Isaac's Bakery. And I slow down and I look in the window and I see a cake. It's calling my name. It looks so delicious. It looks so good. So as I drive by, I say to God, God, if you can just help me find a parking spot nearby, then I know it's a message that it's okay to break my diet and that you want me to have this cake and enjoy myself. And so sure enough, God helped me find a parking spot after only 8 times circling the block. So that's the story of Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence, that we're going to discuss today. So I want to begin with a recap of the past few weeks, the lessons that we've been covering. So today's lesson's title is Meaning in the Unchosen, finding meaning in the moments of life that we didn't necessarily sign up for, but those moments chose us, for better or for worse. So in lesson 1, we talked about how we learned from Ecclesiastes, from King Solomon, the wisest of all men, that as humans, we hunger for meaning. We sometimes look at life, reflect on reality, and say, what's the point of all this? We want something more meaningful. And that pursuit is what sets us apart from all other species of creation. We're looking for something higher to connect to something greater. Comes lesson 2 and tells us that's great, but meaning alone doesn't suffice. There has to be purpose. There has to be something that, as we define purpose being something outside of ourselves, something higher than ourselves, telling us where there should be direction. And we clarified and expounded upon lesson 2 in lesson 3 by saying that the Torah reveals to us the underlying purpose of all of creation. After all, God created the world. God is the script writer of our lives, and therefore we turn to him and we turn to his writings, his Torah, to see what does he want. And we found out that God wants a dwelling place here in the lower world. And as we showed the display of the two hockey scenes, one scoring a goal against an empty net, no big deal, nobody's excited. One is scoring a goal against a very tiny spot that the goalie left open. That is something worth celebrating. Similarly, God wants to have a dwelling place in the most difficult place, here in this physical world where there are no angels. People don't see godliness. All they see is materialism, and we have to learn and understand and come to appreciate God's purpose of all of creation here in this world. And then last week in lesson 4, we talked about the rhythms of time and how they add a layer of meaning to our existence, noticing how every holiday it happens because there's a divine energy behind that day. And it's like a wellspring that we can just dig in and discover all these vitamins. I'm not holding a vitamin water, but if you look on a vitamin water, you'll notice all the vitamins that are available if only you drink from it. Similarly, the Jewish holidays have that ability that we could drink from it and absorb all of that spiritual energy. And then we said furthermore, every day of the year, every day of the week, every day of every moment has special unique energy that we could tap into. Today, we're going to talk about the majority of our lives. You see, most of us can think of an event, an occurrence that we can write home about, that we can say, I remember the time when, fill in the blank. And it's those moments that it's relatively easy to ascribe meaning to those moments. I remember the moment I got the call that got a promotion at work, and that was so meaningful. And I said, "Thank you, God, and God, I'm going to be a good steward of your mission and use my job to facilitate God's mission, whatever it might be." Or maybe I just had a new child. God, I'm going to take upon myself to start coming to shul once a month as a thank you for the new child that I had. Whatever it might be, right? We have meaningful moments in our lives. But the truth is that the majority of our lives are, we're just, we're just trugging along. So, in order to create a meaningful life, truly, it's not just good enough to find moments and sprinkle in meaning here and there, but it's actually discovering the meaningfulness in every single moment, especially those moments that we wish didn't happen. So, the question is, to put it in different words, how can I find meaning in things I didn't choose? Now, I just want to say from the outset that we're not going into the whole concept of theodicy. We're focusing on our response to a personal situation that's unchosen, that's unwanted. What does God want from me in this moment? How can I respond to that moment? So we're going to do a little exercise. If you have your book in front of you, you can open up to page 127. And we're going to do a little audit. I know it's not April 15th, but I'm not the IRS. So instead, we're going to do a meaning audit. And that is to audit your action versus your experience. So I want you to list 2 or 3 things that you chose to do that felt meaningful. And for example, I visited somebody in the hospital, or I spent time studying Torah. Preferably to try to narrow this down and make it relevant, something you did that you chose to do in the last month or so that was meaningful. And then let's do that. In fact, why don't we open it up if anybody wants to share something that they're writing in that first section, feel free to unmute yourself and share something meaningful that you chose to do in the last month or so. Don't all shout at once. I don't hear anybody. It's all muted. So you got to unmute yourself if you're.
Well, spending Thanksgiving with an extended family, I found that meaningful.
Okay, spending Thanksgiving with your extended family. That's a great example. It's something you chose to do. Now, let's go to the next thing, and then I'm going to compare and contrast afterwards. List a few recent things that happened to you, not something that you chose to do. It could be benign, it could be negative, it could be positive. Doesn't matter. You got stuck in traffic. There was a news event. The Dodgers won the World Series. I don't know. Whatever it might be, something that happened to you. Unless you were actually a member of the Dodgers or an investing partner, I don't think that would apply.
Well, my power went out all day today.
Your power went out?
My power was out all day. I wasn't
Okay.
sure I'd make it tonight.
What was it? What did you say?
I,
What was the
I was
impact?
saying, I said our power was out all day. It just came on about an hour and a half ago. I was hoping they would come on so I could see you tonight.
Ah, Baruch Hashem. Thank God it came on time.
Yes. Now I know why it came on.
Ah, very good. So that's obvious. We know why it came on. It came on so that you should be able to join the class. But tonight we're going to try to figure out why did it go off. Okay? So
Yeah.
now take a moment to reflect, and I think most of us can relate to both of those scenarios, even if it didn't happen to you personally in the last month. That something meaningful that you chose would be spending time with your family. Something that you didn't choose, but it chose you, is your power going out. Very relatable. Thank you for those examples. So the question is, which one of those feels more personal? I think I heard that the Thanksgiving dinner feels more personal.
I, I can't see how it could be otherwise.
Okay. Now, which moment felt more meaningful, either immediately or in retrospect? I think I'm hearing the Thanksgiving dinner.
Yes, certainly.
And then the question is what made them meaningful or not? And here's where you have to think a little deeper to articulate the contrast between the two. Why is the Thanksgiving dinner more meaningful than the power going out? And feel free to jump in, anyone else, and give your thoughts.
Because you're with people you love.
Okay? So spending time with people you love is more meaningful than some event with the electrical grid.
Sitting in the dark.
So
Well, what if you love the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power? What if you love?
if you are passionate about that, if you're a water and power nerd and you hate your family, then I'm sure that that would be something a lot more interesting to you. Fair enough. Hypothetically, that is possible. I'll give you that one. So the question is obviously, for most of us, we have moments in our lives when we're not in charge of the script. We didn't choose for our power to go out. We didn't choose for these events to happen. In fact, most of the time, if we're seeking something meaningful, we're going to get out off our seats and go seek that meaning wherever that may be, right? But what about those moments when we're not choosing? We're not in charge of the script, as you see here on page 128. What about when you're not the one writing the script? How is that meaningful? Well, think about it. If you're not writing the script, who is writing the script? God's writing the script. So, um, in other words, this is actually one of the core tenets of Jewish faith, articulated by Maimonides in the 12th century. He wrote a list of 13 principles of faith. Many Jewish communities actually included in their daily prayers, or as an introduction to the daily prayers, or at the end of the daily prayers, to list the 13 principles of faith. And over here, we're going to read in text one that first principle of the 13 principles. Mike, you want to read for us text one?
Text one. Is that page how's the name pronounced? The key to
Maimonides.
find okay. When it's 128, right?
Yep,
Correct?
you got
Okay.
it.
When you're not the one writing the script, the key to finding meaning in the circumstances we experience lies in understanding the extent and degree of God's role in shaping them.
So that was not written by Maimonides. That was written by the Holy JLI institution. But now, right after that, you can read text one. I
All right,
believe.
text one. Okay. And pronounce his name again, Rabbi?
Maimonides.
Maimonides. Is that correct?
You got it.
Maimonides, Mishnah.
You don't need to
Okay.
read the quote. Just read the actual text.
Okay. I believe with complete faith that the Creator, blessed be his name, in the Creator and guide of all created things. He alone makes, and will make all things.
Okay, this is a very, very important text. Notice the timing over here. The past tense, the present tense, and the future tense. So again, he alone made, makes, and will make all things. So on a basic level, what this is trying to drive home is the idea that God is really in charge of everything. He has ultimate authority. Nothing escapes his notice.
Mhm.
And he's not just watching from afar, but he's intimately involved. Um, But some people might not understand this phrase to its fullest extent by saying that, yeah, God is just a supervisor or a managing CEO of this world, which is certainly some element of faith, to believe that God is in charge and has ultimate power and nothing goes against what God wants is certainly very true. And it's important to have this in mind, and it's important to have this principle baked into our psyche. In fact, even from a psychological standpoint, the belief in a higher power is not something that only some weird religious fanatics with a beard and yarmulke believe, but it's actually psychologically beneficial, and we're neurologically wired to be able to believe such things, as Dr. Lisa Miller writes in her book, The Awakened Brain, which she wrote in 2012. Dr. Blitz, if you want to read that for us here in text 2.
Each of us is endowed with a natural capacity to perceive a greater reality and consciously connect to the life force that moves in, through, and around us. Whether or not we participate in a spiritual practice or adhere to a faith tradition, whether or not we identify as religious or spiritual, our brain has a natural inclination toward and a docking station for spiritual awareness. An awakened brain is available to all of us right here in our neural circuitry, but we have to choose to engage it. It's a muscle we can learn to strengthen or let atrophy.
So basically, we have a muscle within us that is basically the belief in God muscle, for lack of a better term, right?
That's a good term.
And what's that?
I like that term.
Belief in God muscle. Yeah, it's
Right.
a muscle in our brain. It's labeled. There's the amygdala. There's the
Hippocampus.
What's that?
It's called the hippocampus.
Hippocampus.
It's where the consciousness is.
Okay.
Or
and in there's a place, there's a muscle in the brain called the belief in God muscle. So that spiritual perception is innate. It's part of who we are, and they did MRIs and longitudinal surveys, which basically discovered this truth. Now, this is of course true for anybody. This is a survey done at Columbia Medical School, but as Jews, we also have a core teaching that it says that the Jewish people are ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim, believers, sons of believers, meaning we are believers. We have something in our soul that helps us believe in God, but also because we are sons of believers, because our parents were also believers, we're more susceptible to believe in God. If there ever were such an illness as that, we're more susceptible to catch that disease of believing in God, right? So
now, has it been broken down to we in other words, there is a muscle inside of us that's designed for worshiping, correct? You said we're neurologically wired to worship.
I didn't
correct?
say that. I said to believe that there is a God. But let's save questions for between sections. I can't be interrupted in the middle of a sentence, okay?
Okay.
So,
all right.
So what we need to do is we need to basically wake ourselves up and tune in to the fact that God is our creator, and he's the one who's in constant control, orchestrating every single detail of our existence. But the Torah tradition actually teaches us something much deeper than just the fact that there's a God out there who's relevant, who's active, who has power and control. Let's look at text 3. Alethea, you want to read this one? This is actually from our daily prayers that we recite after talking about the fact that there are many angels and there are galaxies, all of which praise and acknowledge God, and before reciting the actual Shema, where we declare our acknowledgement and recognition of God, we say this section in the prayer. Go ahead.
Okay. In his goodness, God renews each day continually the act of creation, as it is said, give thanks to he who makes great luminaries, for his kindness is eternal. Psalms
Okay.
136:7.
So this is the first section is a part of our prayer, and within that prayer we're quoting a verse from King David in Psalms, who is saying that God makes great luminaries. Now notice the grammar over here. It doesn't say he made great luminaries 5,786 years ago on day 4 of creation, but he makes great luminaries. In other words, he is constantly creating and recreating every facet of the universe. And this is a concept in Kabbalah that's known as hitavut timidit, which means perpetual or constant creation. So just to contrast that with the one-time creation idea, which many people believe in and have in mind subconsciously or consciously. So some people believe, and again, we're going to contrast our belief with this one, that God created everything and then assigned celestial forces to manage the world. So he's like, okay, this is my creation, sayonara, see you later, alligator, and if there's any problems, please let me know. But the Shalach HaKadosh, Rabbi Yeshaya Levi Horowitz, one of the rabbis, a Kabbalist in Tzfat in the 16th, 17th century, he said, no, actually, we believe in something called constant creation. That God is constantly creating and recreating every facet of existence every single moment. And that means that his influence is ongoing and intentional. This is a very key point. His influence is intentional in every detail of creation. Let's see this in his own words in text 4. Martha, if you want to read that for us. Once you're unmuted.
Got it.
Go ahead.
Text 4. The common understanding of how the heavenly forces operate is this. God, the blessed creator, brought everything into being from absolute nothingness, and therefore has the power to do whatever he wills, even to override or suspend the natural order. At the outset, he assigned spiritual forces to govern the world, each one appointed over its own realm. The world continues to function according to these systems, as if his hand has stepped back, except on such occasions when he chooses to intervene and override them. Until then, these forces operate through the power he originally placed within them at the time of creation.
Okay, so what we just read is the left side of our screen, the one-time creation theory. Now he's going to explain the constant creation theory.
Okay. But in truth, as it seems to me, our faith teaches otherwise. God in his goodness is constantly and deliberately renewing the act of creation every single day. His influence is ongoing and intentional. If for even a moment he were to withdraw this flow, everything would immediately dissolve into nothingness. All of existence would simply cease.
So this is very interesting. The one-time creation theory is, I guess, illustrated here by like a flash. It happens and then it just stays there. The constant creation is like an ongoing line that it's constantly moving, it's constantly being generated and created. And he's saying so much so that if God ever wanted to stop this program, he wouldn't have to do anything. He'd just stop it. There's an old joke where a scientist wanted to square off with God and say, God, how great can you be? I've done some amazing things in my lab and I could basically replicate anything that you've done. And God says, okay, sure, let's see. What do you want to do? So they agreed that they're both going to try to create a human from scratch. And God agrees, the scientist agrees, and they say, 1, 2, 3, go. And the scientist picks up a clump of dirt and he starts. God stops him and says, wait a second. This is not fair. You got to get your own supplies. So, what's the idea? God created everything from nothing, right? So this is not just something that we have to believe in faith that, God has to do this constantly. It only makes sense that if God created the world ex nihilo, that's a fancy Latin word for saying something from nothing, then he has to constantly make that happen. And here's two words you might want to write down in your books, because I don't think it's really in any of the text. I'll put it in the chat. The first term that you want to write down is yesh mi yesh, which means, here I just wrote it in the chat, which means something from something. In Hebrew, yesh means there is, or a thing. Okay, so a thing from a thing. And that's a scientist making one chemical, combining it with another chemical to create something else. Or in the most simple of forms, you mix flour with water to create dough. So when we talk about creating things, oh, I'm a creative. You're not a creative. You're a combiner of elements. That's all you're doing, right? You're combining flour and water, and now you created a dough. Or I'm a video editor and creator. I'm a content creator, right? What does that mean? You're just taking a bunch of frames, right, and putting them together to make a video. We're just taking existing things and combining them together. So it's all yesh mi yesh. That's the term over here. The other term is yesh me ayin. Yesh me ayin means something from nothing. Ayin means nothing. So there's yesh mi yesh and yesh me ayin. Something from something and something from nothing. The way humans create things is they take existing substances. Even magicians, they have to have the magic hat, right? They don't pull things out of thin air. They pull it out of a magical hat. So it's something from something. But God creates everything, something from nothing. And that's the key difference over here. This is something that the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad Hasidism, writes in his Holy Tanya. He has a whole section devoted to the concept of belief in God. It's called Shara Yichud V'Amunah, the gate of oneness and faith. And in chapter 2 over there, he writes the following. Mike, you want to read that for us in text 5?
Text 5. Yes. Where would that be? What page?
The one after the previous page, page 132.
Okay, so it'd be 129?
132.
132, I'm sorry. Okay, the idea offers a clear response to those who deny divine providence and the miracles of the Torah. Their mistake lies in a false comparison. They imagine that God's creation of the heavens and the earth is like human craftsmanship. Just as a craftsperson might make a vessel and then walk away with the vessel remaining intact without the artisan's ongoing involvement, they assume the same is true of the world, that once created, it runs on its own. But they fail to see a critical difference. When humans create something, they're not creating from nothing, okay? They just reshape existing material, like turning a piece of silver into a utensil. But God created the world out of absolute nothingness, then a far greater wonder, even more astonishing than the splitting of the sea. Okay, take the miracle as an example. God used a strong east wind to split the sea, and then the waters stood like a wall. But if the wind had stopped for even a moment, the waters would have immediately returned to their natural state and flowed back down, and they would not have continued standing as a wall on their own. So how much more?
So
how much more? So with creation itself. So how much more? So with creation itself. which is something from nothing. Okay, that's beyond nature, and an event and an even greater miracle than the splitting of the sea. If God were to stop sustaining the world for even a moment, God forbid it, would vanish into nothingness. The world continues to exist only because his creative energy is constantly present within it, giving it life every second.
Okay. So basically, it's a lesson in physics over here. The
Sounds good. What topic in physics are you focusing on?
No, sorry, I didn't ask Google for any physics lessons. You got that wrong. Sorry, you're not that important. Um, the lesson is like this. Is there anything about the physics of silver that prevents it from being a menorah? No.
No.
The physics of silver allows it to be a block of silver, to be a silver coin, to be a silver goblet, to be a silver menorah, pretty much anything, any shape of silver, right? There's nothing about the physics of it that contradicts that new entity, that new creation. And so in the physics, in the nature of that silver is the ability to remain in the new form. So therefore, the creator could just walk away and leave that piece of silver as it is. But water does not, there's nothing about the physics of water that stands as a wall, unless it's frozen, right? But that wasn't the case with the splitting of the sea. And that's why it was such a miracle, that there was a constant force defying the physics of water, miraculously keeping it up as a wall. And just the right direction for the Jews to walk through. That's a miracle. And the truth is, all of existence is a miracle. And I brought with me something just to show you an example, right? Here is, what's this? Anybody? What am I holding?
Lego.
A flatbed.
A Lego truck, a Lego fire truck. There's the hose. See that?
Right.
Kind of low profile.
Okay. So there's my Lego fire truck. And how did this come together? There were a bunch of pre-existing pieces of Lego that were attached to each other. And in order to take this apart, if I no longer wanted this to be a fire truck, I would take one piece at a time, separate it from the rest of the truck, and there will be no more fire truck, right?
Mm-hmm.
But why do I have to do that? It's because the nature, the physics of plastic Lego pieces is such that if it's put together with other pieces, it'll stay there unless you do something to it, right? It'll stay in that default state of remaining now a fire truck. Now let me contrast that for you with a different prop I brought with me today, and that is a set of flying balls. You see, these are flying balls. And these flying balls are just flying. Now, you might think that they're flying on their own, but the only way that they're able to fly is because there's a force pushing them up every time they go back to their natural state of being down, right? So the moment I stop that force of making it go upwards, it just comes down. So the truth of the matter is, they are not flying balls. They are stationary balls. And I'm defying their physical nature by forcing it out of that state of stationariness and now making it moving, making it something different than what its natural state of being is. Similarly, this entire world, all of existence, is not naturally existing. Existence doesn't exist naturally. Or to quote another way of saying it, worlds don't just be. We take for granted, yeah, the world's here. Like it's here to stay. Whatever you believe about the age of the world, certainly in my lifetime, it's always been here, right? But what we're saying is that the world does not exist naturally. The natural state of the world is not to exist. The natural state of flying balls is actually not to fly. Their natural state is to remain stationary. The natural state of the world is not to exist. So therefore, in order for the flying balls to continue to fly, somebody has to make it fly. In order for the world to continue to exist, somebody has to make it exist. God has to make the world exist. Why? Because it's yesh me'ayin. It's something from nothing. And so it might look like it's existating on its own, but someone has to existate it, so to speak. An example for this can be given. This is an imperfect analogy, and that is one-time creation could be compared to a painting. What does a Rembrandt or a Monet or someone like that have to do to paint? They take paint from one place, from a bottle, put it now onto a brush, and then put it onto a canvas. So they're just like building a Lego truck, essentially. You're taking separate pieces of plastic and putting them together to make a Lego truck. But constant creation is more analogous to a projector, right? As long as the light isn't being projected on the wall, and if the projector runs out of batteries, or let's say, Dr. Blitz, to use your example, let's say you have a power outage, right? Now you know why you had a power outage, so you could better understand this idea. The moment there is no more force pushing that light to come out of the projector, there's no more image on the wall, right? And that's really how constant creation works. The moment God would cease to create the world, it would cease to exist. So if God wanted to destroy the world, what would he have to do? He would actually have to do the opposite of doing. The better question is, how does God continue to create the world? Well, because he still wants to do it. So the fact that, what time is it? 6:16 p.m., the world exists. Let's divide this by minutes. How do I know that the world's going to exist at 6:17 p.m.? I don't. You know what? It's up to God. If at 6:17 he decides, I want the world to exist, then it'll continue to exist. But he has to actively, proactively, not just passively, he has to proactively make the world exist. Just like that projection on the wall, you have to constantly project it or else it disappears. So when we say that God writes the script, we mean that actually in the most literal sense. He's composing, he's not just approving a plot line, but he's actually composing it moment by moment. So if something's happening, it's not just because God is allowing it, but he's actively making it happen right now. Let me move this out of the way. Sorry. Or as it says here, God is creating the world moment by moment. So if you think about it, what does that mean? If God's created the world moment by moment, that means everything has a purpose. And if you'll forgive me, I mixed the videos up out of order. So I'm just going to fix the order of the videos real quick, and then we'll get back into this. There, let's go back into what happened here. We're all still here, right? Okay. No, now I lost my Zoom. Share. Back. Share sound. Optimize for video. Perfect. Okay. You all still see me? I can't hear.
Yes, I
Okay,
can see you.
because now I don't see myself. Let's see.
You're
So
there.
you have an identity crisis.
Uh-oh. Content only, side by side. Let's do that. No. Sorry. Let me do background. Let's try that. No, I still don't see show meeting. Show meeting. View. Speaker. And let's go back to share. Let's see. Hide meeting. Okay. I don't know. I don't see myself anymore, but as long as you see me, it's fine, right? So let's
You're there.
So God's creating the world moment by moment. That means every moment that something exists in my world, in the world that I'm experiencing, it's because it has a purpose. So if I see a water bottle in front of me, it exists because God wants it to be there. If I see a Lego fire truck, it exists so that I can use it as a prop in class to explain a concept, right? If I see a baseball cap next to me, it's there. God wants it to be there because it'll remind me that Hanukkah is in less than 2 weeks. And so on and so forth. Everything that's here in this world, certainly if we notice it, it's there for a purpose. So, did anybody notice the fold in the curtain right here? You probably didn't. But now that I pointed it out to you, yeah, there must be a reason. Or let me give a different example. You know, I had a good visual last night for it, and I'm struggling now. But anyways, the point is like this. Imagine you're watching a film, and in the film, the camera zooms in to one of the hinges on a doorpost, right? One of the hinges on a door. You're like, that's a strange thing to zoom into, right? You might zoom into a doorway. You might zoom into a painting on the wall, but a hinge on a door? But you take mental note of that, and you're like, wait a second, this is definitely part of the plot line. Otherwise, why would the cameraman zoom into a hinge on a door? It's so insignificant. Now, it was insignificant until the camera zoomed into it. The fact that the camera zoomed into it makes your imagination go wild, and suddenly you're wondering, wait a second, might there be a hidden camera in there that'll somehow disclose evidence to somebody later on in this story? Maybe that's a loose hinge and somebody's going to break into this room at a later point in the movie. Who knows? The possibilities are endless. But the fact that the camera zoomed into it is an indicator that it's important. So this is a concept what we call Chekhov's gun. Anton Chekhov, who was a playwright, a Russian playwright, he coined the phrase of Chekhov's gun. Basically, if there's a gun in a movie scene, you're going to use that gun in the next scene. Let's see this video that explains this concept.
You're in your seat as the story begins. You notice the way he stands, his accent, his jacket. You notice the gun on his belt, a symbol of bravado. But you didn't think he'd use it. Well, you should have, at least according to a rule known as Chekhov's gun. Anton Chekhov, the 19th century Russian playwright, taught that in a well-written story, every detail must serve the plot. If in the first act you hang a pistol on the wall, it should be fired in the next. Otherwise, don't put it there. In a masterful story, nothing is extra. Every prop has a purpose, every line carries weight. Nothing is random. Is there a storyteller more masterful than the creator of the universe? Is there any story more layered than the one you're living? One of Judaism's oldest mystical texts, Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, describes God as a divine scribe, writing reality into being. We're not just characters in the story. We are the story. And just like a screen goes black when the projector stops, our world depends on God's light every moment. Creation isn't a one-time event. It's continuous, intentional, ongoing. If God stops writing, we stop being. And in his story, in your life and in every event, every detail matters. Every scene, every object, every moment, every choice. If it's here, it has a role. Otherwise, it wouldn't be. Sure, things can look totally random, even horribly random at times. But the author gave us tools to seek the meaning, to live with purpose, even when the plot twists.
All right. Did you notice that little movie sound at the end, like the spinning of the film? It's
Yeah.
interesting how even that detail, whoever edited that video, made that sound at the end intentionally. So you should have that feeling of being in a movie theater and thinking about a play and a movie that you're watching as an analogy for what we're trying to explain over here, right? So the idea is whenever there's something that draws our attention, whether in a movie or in real life, we should pay attention. And so in real life, now going away from the movie, in real life, what happens when something draws our attention? What happens when there's a power outage? What happens when our teeth fall out? What happens when we're stuck in traffic? What is that meant to be? If God is the playwright, if he's a script writer, we must ask ourselves, since we are somebody who is an actor in this play of life, we have to ask ourselves, why are we being shown this detail? Why is God calling our attention to that? Or say, for example, it wasn't your teeth that you lost, but say your legs were blown off, God forbid. God is obviously calling attention to that fact. And how are we to respond? Well, don't ask me. Ask Rabbi Liraz in the next video. Hold on, I think this is the same video.
You're in your
That's
seat
not
as
helpful.
the story.
Let's try this. There we go.
Rabbi Liraz Ze'ira is a Chabad emissary to Nachalot Israel and services students in Jerusalem campuses. He is a major in the IDF reserves, having served in an elite Givati unit, and then as a reserve combat officer in a tank battalion. Rabbi Liraz recently trained to become an IDF rabbi, but along the Syrian border, his life took a dramatic turn.
נפרדתי, זה יום אחרון אחרי 7 חודשים של קו. אני אמור
זה היום האחרון, אחרי 7 חודשים?
למחרת אני חוזר הביתה.
וואו.
באתי להגיד שלום לפלוגת חי"ר שהייתה תחתנו. אחד החיילים אמר לי שהעירוב נראה לו פחות תקין.
העירוב זה הקו שתוחם את האזור, כדי שבשבת אפשר יהיה ללכת עם דברים
בדיוק. הגדרה הלכתית מדויקת. הלכתי לבדוק אותו, במהלך זה דרכתי על רימון שכנראה נשאר שם מהכיבוש של התל.
The explosion shredded his legs and sent him rolling down a hill. He began to bleed out.
היית לבד?
הייתי לבד, זחלתי למרכז.
ואתה מבין שאין לך רגליים?
אני מבין שהרגליים לא מקשיבות לי. והתחלתי לזחול לכיוון הציר, זה 20-30 מטר, עד ששמעתי את החיילים מגיעים לכיווני, התחלתי לצעוק, חיילים מגיעים לכיווני.
למה הם הגיעו?
כי הם שמעו פיצוץ, כי הם ראו עשן, היו בטוחים שיש התקפה על המוצב.
Rabbi Liraz was evacuated in critical condition. As he fought for his life and fought to stay alert, he also fought back his screams to avoid traumatizing the younger soldiers. And while directing those aiding him, he began his spiritual fight.
באיזשהו שלב אני יוצא את העיניים ואומר, טוב, תשחרר, תן להם להוביל, והתחלתי להגיד תהילים. אחד החיילים שרואה אותי ממלמל, אז הוא מצטרף, הוא התחיל להגיד שמע ישראל. ואני פותח את העיניים ואומר לו, לא! אני נשאר פה, אני לא הולך לשום מקום. לא יודע איך הוא...
איזה תהילים אמרת ראשון?
את הפרק של הרבי, את הפרק שלי.
They thought that he was dying, so they're like, say Shema, you know, as you do before one passes away. And he's like, no, that's not part of my schedule right now.
את הפרק של הילדים שלי, שיר המעלות.
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי להרים?
Rabbi Liraz soon discovered that his legs had been amputated. Even in the face of life-changing injury, purpose gave him strength. With a mission in mind, he realized his life hadn't ended, it had only changed direction. Even in loss, purpose became his anchor.
במקום באסה או כל דבר כזה, נהיה לי פשוט מאוד רוגע. ואני יכול להשליך את זה רק על דבר אחד, שזה באמת הזכות להיות חסיד של הרבי מלובביץ' ושליח של הרבי מלובביץ', ולקבל את הנושא הזה של באמת, אין דבר כזה נכה צה"ל. אין מושג כזה נכה צה"ל, יש מצויני צה"ל. אתה לא משהו נחות, אתה לא נכה, זה דבר שנופל, זה... לא. אתה הדבר הכי מצוין שיש, הכי גבוה שיש, ופשוט באותו רגע הבנתי שיש לי שליחות חדשה. שנגמר פרק בחיים שלי ומתחיל פרק חדש לגמרי.
Being thrust into the national spotlight clarified one thing. He had something to give. His influence had direction. It had meaning.
שיש לי מה לתת, שאני חייב לתת את זה, שיש לי המון השפעה על אנשים.
That drive gave meaning to every step he would take next. His mission wasn't just personal. It was to inspire others, showing that challenges can become a calling.
יש לנו יצקו את הקטע שהוא רוקד בראש חודש, נכנס ראש חודש מר חשבן, העלית את הסרטון הזה.
Each act, each post, each interaction became an expression of his purpose, helping others find their own.
תשמע, יש לך כוחות. תאמין בעצמך ותדע שאתה תמיד יכול. ואני יוצא מהאירוע הזה לא רק ביודע שאני יכול, אלא יודע שאני קיבלתי מתנה. זה מאוד קשה להגיד. זה באמת מאוד קשה להגיד, אבל אני אומר את זה בלב שלם לגמרי, שאומנם רגליים איבדתי, אבל שליחות חדשה קיבלתי. וקיבלתי אותה בהמון המון שמחה, והמון באמונה, ובידיעה שאני הולך לצמוח מזה. אני הולך לרוץ יותר ממה שרצתי קודם, זה לא כזה קשה. אני הולך להיות אולי אפילו טיפה יותר גבוה. אני הולך להיות לי כל מיני מבחר של רגליים, כאלה של שטח וכאלה של... ואני הולך להשתמש בזה ואני הולך לעוף על זה, גם בגשמיות וגם בהשפעה של זה.
Each set of legs represented a new way to turn limitation into opportunity, to transform loss into meaning. This calling was now the engine behind every step. Rabbi Liraz's journey shows that purpose changes everything. Even when life takes something from you, a mission gives every moment meaning, every challenge a reason to rise. His new mission and the meaning it brings is only just beginning.
זה שלרבי מלובביץ' יש הרבה סוגי שליחים בעולם, במקומות נידחים, אבל שליח כמוך, עם מה שאתה תהיה עכשיו, זה לא היה לו עד היום, ובהצלחה בשליחות הגדולה.
Okay, that is quite a powerful lesson taught by Rabbi Liraz about when God helps you zoom into something, and Nishvak, anything that shouldn't happen to any of us, that we should have to zoom in on something like this. But even in the more benign and seemingly insignificant events in our lives, when God zooms in to something in our lives that causes a reaction, an emotional reaction, in other words, our attention is being drawn to that event, it's really a clue as to tell us what is our mission here on this earth and what are we supposed to do at this moment. And to him, to Rabbi Liraz, it was, my mission no longer is to stand on my legs physically. As he said at the Shluchim banquet 2 weeks ago when I was in New York, he said on the live stream, he's like, I can't walk and I can't run from now on, I need to fly. In other words, he's like, from now on, I'm going to do my best to use my influence on social media and the web and inspire other people to keep going and to use the gifts that they have for the good. So this is the idea of taking the idea of perpetual creation, that God is constantly creating the world and connecting it to a real life scenario where we're faced with a challenge, and to say, this is how I'm supposed to react. This is what God's telling me to do in this situation. Now, to fully appreciate how every event is purposeful, let's go a step deeper. And this takes us to the idea of Hashgacha Pratis, which is individual divine providence. The word Hashgacha means supervision, or as some would say, providence. And pratit means individual. In other words, the idea is that God is supervising. He has oversight on what's going on in this world, but it's not just that. It's hashgacha pratit. It's individual providence, meaning that this is detailed, it's particular, it's individual, it's personalized for each and every one of us. It's kind of like, to borrow a modern term, it's like our modern day algorithm. God is creating the world around every single one of us with our own unique algorithm. And just like in Facebook and Instagram, you see certain ads only on your account, God shows only you certain events in your lives. And those events, those ads, so to speak, that God's sending you, is a message for you in your life. That's called Hashgacha Pratit. Every detail of creation exists for a reason, not just in the broader sense, but also in the individual sense. There's a beautiful illustration of this from the Baal Shem Tov, who is the founder of the Hasidic movement, who I should say, what was the revolution of the Hasidic movement? One of the key revolutions of the Hasidic movement, which started in the 1700s, early 1700s, was the idea that Kabbalistic teachings are not just for the elite, even though they are Kabbalistic, right? Meaning they are talking about God and the what's the word I'm looking for? The metaphysical. They have a very real impact and influence in how we live the physical life that we live. And so the Baal Shem Tov taught Kabbalah to the masses. He said Kabbalah is no longer for just a mystical exploration or some experience you might do in a sweat lodge with mushrooms and who knows what, but actually Kabbalah is for every person. And this is, by the way, the idea behind the name of this course is the Kabbalah of meaning. It's not the Kabbalah of the mystical, but it's the Kabbalah of a meaningful life for every single person. That was the Baal Shem Tov's revolution with the whole Hasidic movement, teaching these ideas to the masses. And that's why you'll see in text 6, he says the following. The Baal Shem Tov explains that even a piece of straw or a torn leaf rolling in the street is subject to divine judgment. There's a decree for exactly how many times it should turn over, where it should roll, and in which places it should end up. So that leaf floating in the wind, God is counting how many times it should roll, where it should turn over, how many backflips the leaf does, how many front flips, how many side curls until it finally lands, and even then, before it gets lifted up again and moved somewhere else. Every movement of that leaf and of every leaf is intentional. Now, for us human beings, it's hard to comprehend. Who has time for such mishigas? Who has the energy to start thinking about every single detail of this world? This leaf, that leaf. So, if you've been following any of the Black Friday sales, you might have noticed that today's computers come with 32 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of RAM, and so on and so forth. I'm old enough to remember when computers that had 4 gig of RAM were considered high speed, right? But the more RAM the computer has, the more functionalities it's able to do. It's able to run a Zoom meeting. It's able to play a YouTube video in the background. I'm not accusing anybody here of doing that, but theoretically, that could happen, right? You're able to have your emails come in constantly, right? Because the computer has a lot of RAM, a lot of memory to be able to do a lot of things. Now, God has infinite RAM. So he's able to control 1 leaf and 2 leaves, 3 leaves, 1 million leaves, 1 billion leaves, 1 trillion leaves, infinite leaves, and so on and so forth. Everything else in this universe, he has the bandwidth to control it all. And he does. That's what the Baal Shem Tov teaches us. And therefore, every single leaf is meaningful. And he showed his students, he's like, I want to point something out to you. After teaching this, he says, I want you to pick up a leaf right there on the floor that you just noticed fall off the tree. And they noticed that there was a little worm over there, and the worm was actually munching on the leaf. God just delivered lunch, hand-delivered via drone. No, it wasn't even a drone. Before drone technology. This is like organic drone technology. Just a leaf landing, delivering lunch to a worm crawling on the ground. Isn't that amazing? God cared for that worm and sent the leaf on a mission to go feed that worm lunch. And similarly, every single event, every turning leaf, every turning page, every event, every power outage, every medical event, every traffic accident that we encounter is God sending us messages and giving us clues of what our mission is in life. So, imagine it starts to get rainy outside. Clouds are gathering, you hear the rain and the wind, and you think, oy vey, I left my stroller outside, I gotta bring it in. And I didn't fold up the boxes, now they're gonna get all soggy. And then you stop yourself and you say, you know what, Hashgacha Pratis, everything is with a plan. Maybe there's a farmer couple of miles away from here who was waiting for his crops to grow and really needed that rain. I shouldn't be so selfish. I should think about that other person. That is a Hashgacha Klalit mindset, which means a general divine providence mindset. Yeah, God has a reason for the rain. But Hashgacha Pratis, in its truest sense, tells us that no details outside the script. Because God could have made it rain in that guy's field and not in my backyard. But the fact that I have now a flying garbage can because there's winds at 40 miles an hour, or there's a soggy cardboard box, or half my tree broke off and now I need to call a gardener to clean it up. Everything is part of the script. And to use another example, with the economy, the Hashgacha Klalit, the general divine providence mindset is, why did the economy tank or why did the economy crash? Because of some global things. You know, God was trying to prevent a war somewhere, and by changing the economy, that, changed the outcome somewhere else. The Hashgacha Pratis mindset is, why did my portfolio get affected? Why was my personal situation changed? And Hashgacha Pratis teaches us that all of that is for a reason. So let's think about it for a moment. About 5 years ago, everyone here in this meeting, experienced a world event called COVID-19. Now, say what you want, have any theory in the world that you want from it. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole. We're not going to say how it happened, why it happened scientifically, but we're going to try to explore, why did COVID happen on a global scale? In other words, let's look into God's playbook for a second. Imagine you're looking at God's notes, right? Before he goes on stage, he writes notes for himself and then he acts it out. So what was written in God's notes? Why did he plan and execute COVID-19? Again, assuming that God is all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good, why would he make COVID-19? I'd like to hear what you think. Feel free to unmute yourself and share your thoughts.
I can't discern God's mind. I have no idea.
Your best guess. Why would an event like that take place? What could be the possible good outcome from an event like COVID-19 on a global scale? Or let's put it this way. Maybe you don't look at it as the primary intent of why COVID-19 happened, but what are some side benefits that happened to the world due to COVID-19?
Population control.
That's a good thing.
Depends if God thinks it's a good thing.
Oh yeah.
Does God think it's a good thing?
No, I'm sorry. I try to keep an open mind, but I'm going to object to that. There is no room for that in Judaism.
What about greater cooperation amongst the nations?
Okay, so let's say, for example, that various nations cooperated in how to combat this illness. It created a certain element of unity. Great. That's what I wanted to hear. There is something positive that came or could have potentially come out of it. Now, you can argue whether that actually happened or didn't happen, but theoretically, you can see how there might be a positive reason for a world event.
Well,
right?
Perhaps the scientists, go on, doctor. You were going to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking one thing positive that came out of it was the development of mRNA vaccines, which became a key to curing a lot of different diseases, not just COVID-19.
Right. So because they expedited that type of vaccine, that technology can now, and again, regardless of what anybody thinks politically of or medically of various different vaccines, in theory, let's say that vaccine works, that can now be applied for other illnesses potentially in the future, which is a good thing. Okay? Or, for example, people spent more time with their families. And on and on and on. And I don't know why God made COVID-19. I'm not here to give any conclusive explanation or to suggest that it was a net good. I mean, I believe it was a net good, otherwise God wouldn't have done it. But I'm not here to say that I see that net good necessarily. Whatever the case is, now let's focus in on ourselves, right? We all individuals, Ira, Mike, Alethea, Martha, Rona, welcome. Each of us lived through COVID-19, and it affected each of us in a particular way. So, for example, I'll talk about myself now. On March 17th of 2020, I think that was the day, my niece was scheduled to get married in Brooklyn, New York. Now, about a week and a half before that, I had returned from New York. It was when there were some rumblings of something that might be happening. Some people believed it, didn't believe it. I got home safely. And my family and I were scheduled to fly to New York for my niece's wedding. And Purim happened on March 9th, and we had a smaller crowd. Some people were being cautious, understandably. And one day after the next, we started hearing the situation getting worse and worse. And sure enough, we made the tough decision to...
Oh, I'll take my pills.
The right decision, I believe. We made the tough decision to not go to the wedding. And we were disappointed. We were very upset. My kids at the time were 4.5 and 3 years old, respectively. They were very upset that we don't get to go on the airplane. I want to go on the airplane. And we didn't. So what did we do? We, again, keep in mind, God prevented us from going on the airplane, right? I didn't choose to not go on the airplane. It happened to me. God prevented me from going on the airplane. And instead, we created a family Zoom, and our family got dressed up. In fact, all of my siblings, wherever they were around the world, their whole families got dressed up in wedding clothes, and they set their table like a Shabbos table with fancy candles, a nice tablecloth, delicious food, and we all zoomed in and we celebrated the wedding. And when it was time to dance, we blasted music in our own living rooms, and we each danced with our own families, and we had a great time. We made the best of the situation. Now you can say that, okay, it's a second best, right? Ideally, you want to be at the wedding, but we did our best given the circumstances. But Hashgacha Pratis teaches us that that circumstance was intended by God for our benefit. In other words, for us to react and do something in that situation. Now, what might have been the benefit? I don't know, but as I was thinking about this topic, I recalled that week, I think the wedding was on a Tuesday or Wednesday. So that Shabbos, at the Shabbos table, when our family sat around the table, my kids said, oh, let's say l'chaim to Mendy and Rivkala, to the groom and bride, because we had just done that 2 days ago at our mock wedding in our house. So we said l'chaim, Mendy and Rivkala, that they should build an everlasting home, etc., etc. Comes the next Shabbos, and my kids are like, let's say l'chaim to Mendy and Rivkala. And week after week for like a year or 2 years, every week we said l'chaim to Mendy and Rivkala. And I could say l'chaim again to Mendy and Rivkala. Actually, I just, when I was in New York a few weeks ago, I actually snipped their son's hair for his Absharnish for his 3rd birthday. So I don't know, but maybe there was some spiritual reason that we should need to say l'chaim to Mendy and Rivkala, that they should have all the blessings in the world, right? Which, let's be honest, when you take kids to a wedding, you're chasing after them, or at best, you're giving them an iPad to sit in the bridal room and not disturb you, and they're not really part of the wedding, and they come home tired, and then you move on in life. But here, because of the circumstances, that wedding became like an icon and a memory that lasted for a very long time. So here's a situation where you can say, well, why did COVID happen? I don't know why it happened. I don't know why it happened on a global scale. I don't know why it happened to me. I don't know why it happened in my lifetime, in other words. But it happened because God wanted it to happen to me. That much I know. So in other words, not only did God craft the global event, let's go back to the slide over here, but he scripted every local consequence of that global event everywhere to every person individually. He created the algorithm, so to speak, for each and every one of us. Let's see. Oh, wow. Not a lot of time left for a very heavy topic. So the point of the matter is that you're not the background of anything, but you have to realize that God needs you. You are important, and every single thing that surrounds you is a part of the whole script. So it's not just the general idea that you're a character of the story, but every detail, no matter how circumstantial, is with intention. Exactly how the story unfolds, what time it happens, what time of day, who's around you, whatever the circumstance might be, is absolutely intentional. The fact that the power outage happened today and not yesterday and not tomorrow is intentional. The fact that, I don't know if you had guest over, you didn't have guest over, but whatever the case might be, the fact that it happened in this particular circumstance is intentional, and God is trying to send us some sort of message, and our job is to figure out what that message is. So let's look at scenario number 1 on page 134. This is the Hashgacha versus Hashgacha Pratis mindset. In other words, the general divine providence mindset, and then the individual divine providence mindset. So imagine you're sitting in an airport, and suddenly the screen flashes, flight delayed 3 hours, right? And you go, oh, that's so annoying, right? So So the Hashgacha mindset is there must be a reason. So you take a deep breath, say, this is from God. Maybe there's someone who is running late who absolutely must make this flight for reasons of geopolitical importance. This delay will allow them to make this flight. I'll try to be patient because God runs the world and is also watching to make sure I'll be fine. So I'll be okay. It's not ideal, but somewhere out there's a purpose for someone. That's the general divine providence idea. But what the Baal Shem Tov is teaching us is individual divine providence. So let's see the second column over here. Hashgacha Pratit mindset number 1. There must be a reason that is meant for me. The delay must also be meaningful for me. Maybe it's protecting me from something. Maybe something was going to go wrong with the weather if it were to have departed on time. Maybe the meeting I was supposed to attend and that I will now miss would not have been beneficial for me anyways. Or maybe he's just giving me time to finally finish that book I started reading in 2009. And then there's a deeper level, remembering that it's not just this happened for me, but every single detail of the way this happened is intentional. And that's Hashgacha Pratit mindset number 2. There must also be a reason for all the details of the situation. In addition to all the previous truths about the reason for the delay, there's a reason I'm meant to be here now at this exact gate at this exact hour. Maybe I'll end up talking to the woman sitting next to me, and she's someone I'm meant to meet. Maybe I'll learn something from watching the way someone handles their stress. Maybe the book I'm about to read during this delay will spark an idea that changes how I think. And on and on and on. Every single detail can be and should be meaningful and important. Why? Because just like the example of Chekhov's gun, if there's something in that screen, it's there for a reason. If there's a loose hinge on the door, it's there for a reason. And I have to pay attention to it. If there's a delay, I have to pay attention to that and see what's the message that I can take from it. There's a story, speaking of flight delays. There was a Chabad Women's Convention in Detroit in the 80s. And most of the women were coming from New York. And many of them had young families that they had to get back to. And after the weekend, there was a big snowstorm. And many flights were canceled, including their own. I believe all flights in and out of Detroit were canceled. And they called the Rebbe's office in Brooklyn, and they asked to give a message over to the Rebbe that all the women that came for this convention are now stuck in Detroit. The response came back pretty immediately, saying, a Jew is never stuck. Go figure out why God kept you in Detroit for a longer period of time. And before you knew it, these women spread out across the airport, and there was not a Jewish woman in sight who did not receive Shabbos candles and wasn't encouraged to light Shabbos candles that week. Why? Because these women knew, it finally hit them like, of course, Hashgacha Pratit. God wants me to be in this airport at this time, because if not for me being in this airport at this time, meeting those other people whose flights were delayed and canceled, they might not light Shabbos candles. And as a matter of fact, years later, some of these women followed up with some of the people they met, and they were still lighting Shabbos candles, not just that week, but every single week thereafter, because of that encounter. So that's the Hashgacha Pratit mindset, that it's not that I'm here for some benefit. It's I'm here very much intentionally. So on page 136, you can add another hypothetical scenario to the Hashgacha versus Hashgacha Pratit mindset. So if you don't mind, Dr. Blitz, feel free to say no, but how can you read in to there must be a reason for the power outage, or there must be a reason that this is meant for me, or there must also be a reason for all of the details of the situation? Do you have any thoughts on that scenario? It's okay if you don't. We could skip it, but if you do, I'd love to hear it.
I'm trying to think of a good reason. Certainly, it made my family get together to see how we could manage with the situation.
Right.
And so we had a little bit more togetherness we might otherwise have had today.
So it was like a team building exercise.
Sort of, basically.
I hear.
And at the same time, my son's car went dead due to a battery in the middle of the power outage.
Oh, that's fun.
So we were having multiple issues all at the same time, but we got together and figured out one, two, three, what steps to take to overcome the situation. And by the end of the day, everything got resolved.
Wow, that is a very powerful lesson. So now imagine somebody, a very human response might have been that suddenly there's a lot of family drama and everybody's getting mad at each other and yelling at each other. Why did you do that? I think it's because you plugged this in and it's whatever. You should have noticed that you better, and everybody could be yelling at each other and getting upset at the situation, which is really just their own uneasiness with an uncomfortable situation, and that's the way they're reacting and looking to blame somebody. But when you realize Hashgacha Pratis and its implications is God turned out my electricity today. God made that battery die today. Why did he do that? And what does he want me to do in this situation? So I think one very good thing, and I think you did this correctly, so round of applause, is let me make sure that I am peaceful and kind and respectful to my family throughout this situation, right? That's something that God would want us to do. So in other words, let's go to the next section in our lesson, which is how to find the purpose in each situation. The purpose for our lives at any given moment is hiding in plain sight. So imagine you're being sent on a mission. You signed up for the U.S. Army, and they're like, okay, you're going to Haiti. I don't know for how long you're going to be there, but get on this plane, take this bag with you, and just go there. But what do I need to do? Just go, figure it out. And what do you have to do there? What's the most important ingredient to success in that situation? Keeping your eyes open, keeping your eyes peeled, waiting for clues and ideas. Maybe there's a threat I need to eliminate. Maybe there's somebody in danger I need to help. I don't know, but I have to keep my eyes open. And Hashgacha Pratis asks of us to keep our eyes open to every situation. So my power went out. Keep my eyes open. What does God want me to do in this situation? So the mission will unfold eventually. All we have to do is pay attention. So generally speaking, the mission is, as we learned in lesson 3, to make a dwelling place for God in this world. God sent me a clue in how to make this world a better place for him. And generally, there's one of 3 ways. It's actually very simple. And you could go down a checklist. Anytime you're in a stressful or unwanted, unchosen situation, say, number 1, is there a mitzvah I can do because of this that I might not have been able to do otherwise? So by mitzvah, I mean like a mitzvah between us and God, a spiritual endeavor. Or can I help somebody else, which of course is also a mitzvah, but that's a mitzvah between 2 humans, right? So I'm stuck in the airport. Maybe now I have more time to pray. Maybe I was planning on praying on the airplane and kind of not have the proper focus and concentration. Now I have 3 hours free and I can pray without any concerns, right? Or maybe I can help somebody. Maybe I could walk around, see somebody in distress. Maybe they don't have internet on their phone and I can help them rebook their flight, whatever it might be. Or maybe I need to work on myself. I need to refine my own character. Maybe I'm feeling stressed. Maybe I'm getting all worked up and angry. And maybe I need to say, wait a second, God put me in this situation. And yes, I tend to get angry and frustrated and overreact when these things happen. And I need to work on myself to calm down and remember that God's in charge and that this is intentional. And that alone, that exercise itself, helps build our own character and become a better steward of God's world. So I'm making the argument here that Hashgacha Pratis tells us that any situation you're in, choose one of these three, or more, or more than one of these three. Either a mitzvah between you and God, to help somebody else, or to refine yourself. One of those three things is now being facilitated by this new challenging and unwanted situation. And the truth is that as Chabad Shluchim, as emissaries of the Rebbe, we're trained in this idea that whenever we have some change in our situation, it's almost like we're excited and we're looking forward, like, ooh, what's the new mission? What's the new encounter that might happen because of that? Maybe now I'm going to be rebooked on a different flight, and I'm going to now sit next to somebody who happens to be Jewish and lives in Arcadia, and they're going to come to me for next Shabbos. Who knows? Whatever the reason might be. It's so exciting because now I'm curious and I'm excited to see what God has in store for me. And that's incredible. So sometimes the answers are obvious. Sometimes it's like smack in the face, like, wow. Last night I was teaching this idea at class, and there was a gentleman who was having some allergies, and the woman sitting next to him noticed that she actually has a Benadryl in her pocket. She said, you have to understand, I haven't worn this jacket in I don't know how long, but the Benadryl was sitting there in the pocket. And here you go, you can use it. So there is God in real time saying, look, the reason why you had the allergies, not just you had allergies, but you had it during the class, sitting next to this woman, is so that she can help you and do the mitzvah of helping somebody in need. And you facilitated that by both being in the same place. So sometimes the answers are obvious. Sometimes it's more subtle. And by the way, there are times that we don't even know what was the purpose of our mission. But we always have to be curious. We're getting low on time. I want to just okay, let me just share the story in text 8 briefly. Basically, every summer, Chabad sends out yeshiva students to all places around the world, basically mostly places where there are no Jewish infrastructure, or existing communities to help find Jews to connect them to their Jewish roots. This summer, we actually had, I don't know if some of you might have met Ellie and Mendel, who came by, and they were going to homes that were on our address list, mostly people we haven't met, some people that we do know, and just trying to engage them. Now, in the 1950s, there was a set of such yeshiva students that were sent somewhere in the Midwest, and they came back. They didn't really meet anybody. Most of their time there was fairly unsuccessful. But as it turns out, there was one Jew who just saw them walking and assumed that they must be from Eastern Europe or whatnot. And it turns out that the guy was from Boston. He's like, oh, Bostonian. Oh, I would never imagine a Bostonian to walk around with a black hat and a beard and payas at his sides and tzitzis flying out. That's so un-Bostonian. And that is very unique to see in 1950-something, to see a Bostonian walking around in such a way. And that had a profound impact, that this Jew who just saw it and never met the guy, he just saw him out his window, he eventually started keeping kosher, and on and on and on. He really transformed his life because he was inspired just from that sight. So you never know. You never know who you might have an impact on. You never know what your reaction to a particular situation might do. Maybe even just sitting calmly and talking respectfully to the flight attendants at the counter in the airport, that might have a profound impact on somebody else who's watching you. So that's something else to keep in mind. Then in text 9, anybody would like to read this one? Put it up for grabs. You can just unmute yourself and go to page 143.
Yeah. I can read it.
Go ahead.
Everything that God created in his world has purpose. He did not create a single thing in vain. The same is also true of all events and occurrences in the world. Nothing happens in vain. Everything is under divine providence. As a result of this, in the world, meaning in the personal world of each and every individual, there exists only God and the person.
Yeah.
Everything else is merely a means through which the individual fulfills their service of God. Anything that does not pertain to their service of God is something they have no awareness of, for there is no thing or awareness that is in vain. The entire world, one's personal world, is nothing more than a tool and a medium through which they reach their purpose, the ultimate goal for which they were created.
So basically, the idea is like this. God created the world for a purpose. But as far as I'm concerned, God created me for a purpose. As far as you're concerned, God created you for a purpose. And every moment, we need to ask ourselves, how am I fulfilling that purpose? And how has God given me the toolbox to fulfill that purpose? And so when I look around the room, or I observe a situation, or I'm aware of a situation, all of those are part of my toolbox that God has given me directly. That's not to say that for the next person, he has a different set of tools. But the idea is that we are given this toolbox, each piece of it, very, very intentionally. And that's why the Baal Shem Tov teaches us in text 10 that, that every single thing one sees or hears is an instruction for their conduct in the service of God. This is the idea of avoda, service, to comprehend and discern in all things a way in which to serve God. So here's what he's saying. If God is constantly creating the world, and that means that every leaf fluttering in the wind is intentional, and my existence is intentional, and the walls around me are intentional, the people I interact with and that happen to be present in the same room as me are intentional, how do I react to that? Am I going to use that as an opportunity to be kind to somebody? Am I going to use that as an opportunity to do a mitzvah? Am I going to use that as an opportunity to refine my character? Whatever it might be, I am able to react to that situation, keeping in mind this Hashgacha Pratis mindset. So, let's go back to the slide over here. Or, let me just summarize some of the things that we skipped. Oh, sorry. Where are we at? Skip this. Our mission is exactly where we are. Meaning is in everything. It doesn't depend on our ability to see it. That's what we said, that sometimes you could be walking in the street and have an impact on somebody. But when we are aware of something, that is part of the plan. So we don't know. I was giving an example of the other day. I witnessed a car spin out of control, and thankfully the person a minute later walked out of his car. He looked like he was okay. I would have gone out to help him, but I had my little kids in the car. I couldn't leave them, but I waited till somebody else got out of their car to check on him, and I also called 911 to report it, and that's the most I was able to do. And I was able to eventually drive around. And seeing that there was somebody else there and 911 on the way, I felt comfortable to move on. But the fact that I was aware of it meant I had to do something. Maybe it wasn't go out and pull the guy out of the car. Maybe it was only my job was to call 911. But I had to do something. Why? Because I was aware of it. Now, there are thousands of car crashes, unfortunately, that happen around the country every day. But I'm not aware of it. So I don't have to start becoming neurotic and thinking about every single thing that happens in the world. But the things that I do encounter is part of God's plan. God planned that I should be right there 100 feet from the crash. And so I have to do something about it. So imagine you board a bus and you find yourself sitting next to a stranger. So the Hashgacha Pratis mindset tells us that this seat assignment isn't random. So you could either be annoyed and say, "Oh, I wish I had a double seat," or maybe I'll just strike up a conversation to pass the time. Or you can say, "No, there must be some purpose for our meeting. Maybe they work in the same industry as me. Maybe they're Jewish and we could connect on that level." Whatever it might be, but there is a purpose in us sitting next to each other. Maybe it's to teach them how to be a good neighbor and indeed mind your own business and plug in your headphones if they don't want to talk, right? Whatever it might be. But we always need to ask ourselves, what does God want from me in this situation? Or, for example, you walk into a store, you see an upset cashier. How would you react? How would God want you to react in that situation? Or let's say your daughter walks in the middle of teaching a class and you smile at her, right, Sarah? You want to say hello to everyone just for a second? Say hi. 1 second. Let me show them to you.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi.
That's enough. That's enough.
Hi.
Okay. Back to what we're saying. Or let's say you have some extra time when you arrive at a meeting or you arrive to a class or a doctor's appointment, and because you overestimated the traffic and you got there early, God put you there earlier. What can you do with that extra time? How can you make it meaningful? And that's what the Hashgacha Pratis mindset tells us, is that God put us in this situation, and what's the personal meaning behind that is something we have to ask ourselves. Now, sometimes we're fortunate enough to see what the meaning is. Sometimes we're not. But there is always a purpose and a reason for why every situation happens to us. Now, what happens if what we happen to notice is not an airline flight delay, or is not just somebody who needs help, but what if we notice? Please stop that. What if we notice somebody doing something really disgraceful? How do we react to that? Why did God bring to our attention that somebody is acting in an inappropriate way? So you might say, well, it's my job to react to that and reprimand them, tell them they should live a better life. But the Hashgacha Pratis mindset can be learned from the story of Noach after the flood. It says that Noach, after the flood, in text 11, would somebody like to read text 11 here on page 145?
Right.
Go ahead, Alethea.
Okay. Noah began to farm and planted a vineyard. He drank from the wine, became drunk, and lay exposed in his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and told his 2 brothers outside. Shem and Japheth, I can't say that. Japheth took a
Sounds
garment.
good. In Hebrew, it's Yafet.
Japheth took a garment, laid it across their shoulders, and walked backward to cover their father's nakedness. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness.
Okay, so it's very interesting. It's kind of repetitive. First, it says their faces were turned away. And then it says again that they didn't see their father's nakedness. Well, yeah, if their faces were turned away, of course they're not going to see their father's nakedness. So why did it have to repeat itself? So the Rebbe teaches us that, of course, every single letter in the Torah, every single word, and certainly every verse in the Torah is very precise. And what we're learning here is 2 things. Number one is it says their faces were turned away, meaning their physical orientation was such that they didn't see him. But then the Torah reiterates that they did not see their father's nakedness. What that means is that not only were they physically facing the other way, but their mental orientation, their attitude was such that they didn't process any negativity going on in their father. Now, you could say, objectively speaking, it was wrong for Noah to get drunk in such an irresponsible way, to the point that he's lying there in his tent, completely exposed. But what we're learning from this story is there's two ways to react to this. You can react like Cham, like his middle son, who exposed his father, and it says actually he violated his father. He took advantage of that situation in the most profane way possible. Or you could not look at that situation and instead fix the situation and correct it without seeing the flaw in the other person. So what we're learning here is really a lesson in life, that when we see negativity in somebody else, it's not so that we should go and say, look at that person, look at how disgraced they are. You see somebody who unfortunately is addicted to drugs, and they're homeless and whatever it might be. So the Cham approach would be, look at that person, look at what a lowlife and a loser he is. The Shem and Yefet approach is not to look at them, not to see the flaw in them, but to approach them ignoring their flaws and just to offer help, whatever help that might be. Now, the Baal Shem Tov teaches us further. If we do experience the Cham reaction, if we do tend to highlight the negativity in others, really that's a mirror to ourselves. Really, that's a mirror that God's saying, you don't realize that you have this flaw, but I'm going to display it in a mirror to somebody else. It says that a person is judged knowingly and unknowingly, meaning a person passes judgment on themselves often when they pass judgment on others. So you can say that Cham might have been like, oh, look at this guy. He's immodest. Look at my father. Look how immodest he is. And having known the story now, we can say, really? Your father's the one immodest because his clothes fell off when he was drunk? Or are you the immodest one who willingly went and violated him? I mean, if there's anybody who's immodest, it's the one who committed such an egregious act, right? But why did God show Noah to Cham? It's really to tell him to look into the mirror and say, you see nakedness? You see immodesty? You're the one who has that problem. But instead of Cham taking that message, instead of him internalizing the Hashgacha Pratis mindset and realizing, oh, this is a message for me from God, he just saw the other person and says, look at that guy. Think about it for a second. As a father of, thank God, 4 children, sometimes a child has a dirty diaper, right? As a father, would I tell my 5-year-old that my 2-year-old has a dirty diaper? No. What's the point? Well, it's true. She has a dirty diaper. Why not tell him? Well, because it's not relevant information for him, right? But if I had an 18-year-old, I might tell the 18-year-old that my 2-year-old has a dirty diaper. Why? Because the 18-year-old is capable of changing the 2-year-old's diaper. Now, I'm not going to get into parenting philosophy, whether you should ask your older kids to help your younger kids. But the point is, the only scenario in which I would say something degrading or negative or less than complimentary about one of my children to another child is so that the other child can help the child in need. Now, we are all God's children. When we see somebody else's flaws, God told us about that other person's flaws. God, Hashgacha Pratis, with individual divine providence, made us aware of that other person's flaws. The reason for that certainly is not so that the 18-year-old should say to the 2-year-old, haha, you have a smelly diaper. The reason is not so that we should look at the other person and laugh at them and mock them and go tell their friends about the other person's negative traits. Absolutely not. That's your sibling. That's your brother. That's your sister. Why would you go gossip about them? Instead, go take the sheet, not looking at them, and cover them. Help them. Change their diaper. Whatever it might be. Whatever type of help that person needs. That's the message that we have to take from the Hashgacha Pratis mindset, that God sent me as the father of both of us. He sent that awareness to me, basically giving me a clue, sending me a message of what I should do in this situation. There's a story of the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom Dov Berry, who was walking with his son, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak. And I'll conclude with this story. And they were talking about this idea of the Hashgacha Pratis. And Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak heard what his father had taught him about this concept, and that, nothing just happens, everything is with divine intent. And as they were walking along, he was meditating on this thought. And as one does, he plucked a leaf off a tree and started tearing it to shreds, just in the process of his deep contemplation and meditation. And his father stopped him and reprimanded him and said, do you know that that leaf was created by God intentionally, and you're just treating it so callously and just ripping it up to shreds? How dare you do such a thing? Now, granted, this is not for the faint of heart. This is not for most of us to go reprimand our kids for ripping up leaves. We have bigger fish to fry. But Yosef Yitzchak, the Friedrich Rebbe, was on a level that his father could tell him that, and that was really the level on which he needed to work on. But the bottom line is that we need to ask ourselves whether or not we are awake to the script that God is presenting in front of us, and that we have to look for the divine presence in all things, which gives us clarity and direction to our mission in life. Before I go to the video summary, there's actually a really, really important video that I grew up with. It's part of my childhood. This is really how I was taught these ideas as a child, which is, of course, through video. It's a 5-minute clip, but I think it really gives you a really it's a cute clip. You'll see. Let me just make it larger, and we will share the screen of that, and let's go. Oops, no, not that. And press play. There.
Jede Sache, was trifft sich in Welt, ist das nicht Chas v'Sholem Mikro, Nikra, zufällige Sache, weil das ist bei Hashgacha Pratis von
by
dem
divine providence by God.
To walk to school. If only that light had been green, maybe I would make the bus.
No battle. Is that what we learned in class?
Oh, hello, Rabbi Barnes.
Hi.
I haven't seen you since you taught us in 4th grade.
And do you remember what we learned? I know, Battle. You must be upset about missing the bus, huh?
Yeah, that light wouldn't turn green.
But Battle, what about Hashgacha Pratis? You know that even making buses on time is all dependent upon what Hashem has in store for us. You know, Hashem has a master plan for everything in the world. And Hashgacha Pratis is always working, making sure that everything that happens is according to Hashem's plans. There's no such thing as coincidence. Hashem has designed everything that takes place, well, from the leaves that are fluttering in the wind to our meeting here today. Well, you have a minute? I want to tell you a story.
Well, the bus route takes longer to get to school than it would take me to walk, so I have a few minutes.
Good. Once, the Rebbe Rashab and his son, the Rebbe Rayatz, were traveling. On the way, they saw two Chassidim, Reb Peretz and Reb Mendel, on their way home from the town of Lubavitch and reviewing a mimer they had heard from the Rebbe. The Rebbe Rashab turned to his son and said, "You should know, for 5,661 years, 9 months, 11 days, 15 hours, and so many minutes, this place has waited for Peretz and Mendel to sit here and say Divrei Torah. Sometimes we know what Hashem plans, but sometimes we don't. Yet a chassid is always happy and calm because he knows that Hashem is always watching over us. And anything that happens, well, that's Hashgacha Pratis. You know? Hashgacha Pratis, I think you can help me. This letter has to get to Union Street. You see this address here? Do you think you can drop it off on the way to Yeshiva?
Yeah, but I have to leave right now.
Okay, thanks a lot. And have a great day.
Hey, how you doing, my man? Everything okay?
I'm looking for this address and I can't find it.
You can't find it? Well, hey, I'm a policeman. It's my job to know these things. I'll help you out.
Boy, is this Hashgacha Pratis.
What's that?
I don't know.
Let's see. Well, you got 1374, you got 1376. Okay, I see this doesn't have a number on it, but this must be 1378 right here. Okay, why don't we go check that out for you? Okay. Come on. 1370, all right, this should be it. How are you, sir?
Okay, everything all right?
Oh, everything is fine. Yeah, actually, I was just helping out my little buddy here. I believe he has a parcel for you.
A letter from Rabbi Barris.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.
By the way, aren't you the officer that helped me a couple of weeks ago? My car stalled late at night?
Right, right. Oh, that was you over on Eastern Parkway and Brooklyn Avenue over here.
Right.
I remember. How's the car?
Oh, the car's fine.
Oh.
It's really nice to see you.
Likewise, likewise. I'm glad the car's running well now.
Well, I really want to thank you again for all your help, but I was so flustered that night I just didn't get an opportunity to, get your name at all.
Oh, well, the name is Brooks, but, as they say in the trade, I was just doing my job. Okay, listen, take care.
Oh, that's nice. What a nice Hashgacha Pratis.
Oh, that's the second time I heard that expression in the last 2 minutes. What does that mean?
It's Hashgacha Pratis, and it means divine providence. Everything in the world is planned by God. Things don't happen just by chance. It's God that brings it all about. You see, because you helped that boy find my address, I got the opportunity to thank you personally for your help.
I see. Okay, now I understand. Oh, okay, well, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
You have a good day.
Thanks a lot. You too.
All the best.
Okay. Hey, Benji.
Hey,
how are you,
Mr. Brooks,
Benji?
how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Hey, you're just the person I wanted to see.
Yeah, what for?
We have to discuss the permit for the street closing for your school.
Okay.
Boy, this is really Hashgacha Pratis.
Huh?
Okay. So there you have it. Hashgacha Pratis. So even Officer Brooks managed to internalize this lesson, to realize that the fact that he bumped into that child helped this guy say thank you to him and helped the guy running the school get the permit and everything he needed. So all we got to do is look out for these special Hashgacha Pratit scenarios in our own lives, because they're happening day in and day out. And it's our job to just tune in and be more aware and conscious of all these scenarios. I'm going to skip the key points video. You can read them to yourself on page 146, or you can go to myjli.com/Takom. I'll put the link here in the chat. TKOM, the Kabbalah meaning. And over there, you can watch the slideshow that we saw today. You can watch some of the videos we saw today, as well as some other videos and articles that relate to this lesson. So I encourage you to check that out. And we'll see you all next week for lesson 6, the final lesson of the course. I want to encourage you. We'll still do the Zoom if anybody needs it, but I really want to encourage you all to join us in person. We're going to hand out certificates for all those who joined us for the course, and it'll be a really special event. It also coincides with with Yutes Kislev, the Rosh Hashanah for Hasidism. We'll talk more about that next week, but we'll see you then. So thank you very much for joining us.